Fantasy Fuel is powered by Poll Sports. Get instant fantasy football advice through real-time polls by visiting pollsports.com. Welcome to Tom Tuttle's Thursday Night Preview. This week we got the Kansas City Chiefs going up against the Denver Broncos. Now, the Chiefs have struggled a little bit the last few weeks, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be fantasy relevant. They will very much so be. And the Broncos have actually done pretty well the last couple weeks, and they've won some games. Now, it's been against not so good teams, but it's still wins are wins, and that's good. So it gives you some hope that there's going to be some fantasy relevant players on that team, as well as the Chiefs, which right now we're just going to go right down the Chiefs list of people who are probably going to make a fantasy impact, or at least I can give you a heads up on some of these guys. Now, obviously, you start with Patrick Mahomes. We've seen a little bit of adversity, like I said, for the Chiefs in the last couple of weeks, and Mahomes really hasn't had the ridiculous scoring for fantasy, but he's still a very solid play. I mean, unless you have somebody like Russell Wilson, or Lamar Jackson, or Watson, you're going to have to play Mahomes. He's been fantastic all year. He's just not being the ridiculous Mahomes that you remember from last year and even earlier in this year, where he was putting up 30, 40 points per game. Now it's 20, 25, and that's good enough. You don't need to have anything else. That's fine. But unless you have, like I said, the other three guys that are putting up really good numbers, you're probably it's insane to consider benching Mahomes at any point. Now let's move on to their running backs position, and you got Carlos Hyde, who has been surprisingly consistent. He has been consistent. Now, he had a great game last week. He had 116 yards. He had a touchdown, and he had a reception as well. Now, I expect him to continue his consistent season, and I think he can have about 15 points this week on Thursday night. He's a good running back too. He's a good RB2 in my eyes because he's been consistent. He's gotten 10 to 15 to 20 points every single game. He's not really had that really bad game. It's always been something. Now, he's very touchdown dependent. If he doesn't get that touchdown, it's not going to be that great of a day. But he's been getting the touchdowns on a consistent basis. So that's something you have to look at. If I have Carlos Hyde, I'm flat out playing him as an RB2 or maybe a flex position, depending on what else I have. Tyreek Hill. Yep. I mean, need I say more? He's been fantastic since the comeback. It's only been 1 week, but man, I tell you, that's a lot. That's a lot in people's eyes. Now you're thinking, I got a stellar wide receiver that I can play again. Because I was in that very same situation where I had Tyreek Hill in our listener league for Fantasy Fuel, and I'm just sitting there waiting for him to come back, and he finally came back, and he gave me the boost. He helped me win this last week because of his performance. And there's no way I'm expecting him to get worse. It's going to be about that the rest of the year. At least I hope so, unless he gets hurt. Or if his girlfriend or significant other, whatever you want to call it, comes forward and makes a whole new thing for him, that we'll have to find out about that. I don't think that's going to happen, though. I really don't. What I think is going to happen, he's going to play the rest of the year, and he's going to have a very, very solid year. And Tyreek Hill this week, absolutely you're playing him. Absolutely you're playing him. You have to. Now let's go on to Sammy Watkins. Nope. Need I say more? Listen, I don't like Sammy Watkins. I can't do it anymore, Sammy. I'm sorry. I've done this so many times with you. This is where it ends. I'm not doing it anymore. Now, he has an injury as well, so you have to kind of keep aware of that. We don't know whether or not he's going to play this week anyway, so I'm not going to touch him anyway. Even if they say he's 100%, I'm not doing it. I've fallen down that rabbit hole too many times with Sammy Watkins. I am done, completely done with him. And then you got people like Pringle, you got Robinson, and you got Hardman. All of these guys have chances when you got Patrick Mahomes, but all three of them are a big chance. Now, somebody like Hardman might be a little less of a chance if you're in a kick return league because he has that ability for the kick return yardage, and that really does help in a lot of leagues. So that's something you can pay attention to. But all three of these guys have a chance when Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball, but you just don't know which one it's going to be. So let's just hold off on them guys. I would say on Thursday night, I'm willing to not play them and hope for somebody else for the rest of the week. And then you got Travis Kelce. I mean, this is probably the safest pick on this team other than Patrick Mahomes. He's been underwhelming this year, and there's no doubt about it, but he's been consistent. Even though he's been underwhelming, he's been consistent. You were expecting these astronomical numbers. You're not getting that right now, but he's still been consistent. Right now, he's the number 3 tight end overall, even with the stinker of a game last week. It was not a good game because he didn't score. I think he scored less than 10 points in fantasy football. But that's okay because he's been very consistent, and you know he's going to get his looks, and he's going to get his targets and his catches. It's all going to come this week against the Broncos. I expect fully for him to get right back on pace. So I'm starting Travis Kelce. Why wouldn't you start him? With the way the tight end position is right now, it's not even a consideration to bench him. So you're starting Travis Kelce. Now let's go on to the Broncos. Well, it might be a little more tricky because some of these guys they're not proven. And the Broncos aren't winning games too much. Now, the last 2 games they played a really bad Titans team. And what else can you say? The Titans aren't good. Now, with Tannehill under center, there's a possibility. They still haven't announced it as of yet that he's going to be the starter. But I have a feeling it's going to be Tannehill. But anyway, on to the Broncos on this Thursday night game. Now, if you got Flacco on your team, hopefully you have a better quarterback than this, first of all. But if you don't, I understand why you might want to play him for a bye week. That's fine. Or if you're in a really big league and you have a guy on a bye week, I understand that. There's no really problems there. You're going to get something out of him. But he's definitely not a starting quarterback in most systems. But he's not terrible if you got somebody on bye. But other than that, I'm probably not going to play Flacco. Philip Lindsay, though. Now, this one he's been surprising. Right now, he's got 397 yards. He's got 4 touchdowns. He has 19 receptions, 147 yards receiving. These are really pretty good numbers. And if you don't believe me, just kind of put it in this level. He's on pace to break 1,000 yards rushing. So that just doesn't happen if you're not a consistent running back. And I really believe in him right now. To me, he's a high-level RB2, or at the very least, he's a flex guy. I'm starting him probably every single week, and this week I'm going to 100% start him. He's been a really good guy for me on my team that I've had in the Flag League. We talk about a lot at Fantasy Fuel. He's been a starter. He's been my best running back all year because he's been extremely consistent. Now, you also have Royce Freeman, who has 284 yards. He's got 21 receptions with 145 yards as well. Now, the 21 receptions, that's what keeps him in your lineup as maybe a flex option. That's probably the best you can put him. If you're really struggling at running back, you might have to play him as like an RB2 or something like that. But at best, he's a flex. And you're going to have to figure that out if you're going to start him or not. I'm not certain this is the week for Royce Freeman. I'm probably playing Lindsay. I'm not going to go with Royce Freeman, especially on a Thursday night game. Something's always kind of a downer of a game. So if you have somebody like Royce Freeman in a Thursday night game, this goes for all Thursday night games. If you have somebody like him, it's probably best not to start him on Thursday night, just because Thursday night is just most of the time. But until they get rid of Thursday night games, we have to do this. So get used to not playing these guys, even though you think they might have some kind of production, you probably have another better option on Sunday night with somebody who has a full rest, and Royce Freeman doesn't. All right, well, let's go to their wide receivers, which you got Sutton. He's actually been pretty consistent. He's gotten darn close to an RB1 type of player right now in my eyes. And he's a high-end RB, or I'm not saying RB. He's a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. And right now he's a high-end wide receiver 2. And he's been the best receiver for the Broncos, and basically because Emmanuel Sanders not been good. He hasn't been good. He was great the first 2 weeks, and then he fell off the map. He's got this knee injury now, and they say it's not a huge deal. And do you put him out there? I don't. They say he's going to play, but man, do you trust it? Do you trust it? Because you look back at the last few weeks, and he has not been good. So even if he's out there, do you really think it's going to be a good week? Especially on a short week where he's not got all that time to recover from that knee injury? I just don't know if I trust it. Now, the fact that he did come out of that game last week and didn't try to play through the injury gives you some hope that maybe they're trying to just rest him up so that he can have this next week. And listen, they won last week without him. So they're going to need him this week to play. So that maybe gives you that glimmer of hope, that glimmer of a chance that you can start him this week. But it's really difficult to do because he's been so bad the last few weeks. And when you got that injury on top of it, it makes it even worse of a scenario. So I can understand the start, especially with bye weeks hitting, and some people are getting hit really hard this week. So I understand that. But it's really difficult to start somebody like this who's been really, really bad the last few weeks. Now, he could come back and be great, but it's hard to say. And then you got their tight end position with Noah Fant. He's not an option right now in fantasy football. Not until we see him get more usage out of the tight end position. We just haven't seen it enough. I think at some point he's going to be a very fantasy relevant tight end, but not right now. So that's really about it, guys. I thank you for listening. I do want to remind you to go to pollsports.com every single week. You can ask your starts and your sits questions, and you can even ask, hey, is this a fair trade? Who wins this trade? All sorts of questions. Go to pollsports.com and get your questions answered for fantasy football today. Remember, that's pollsports.com. You can find Fantasy Fuel at Spotify. You can find us at iHeartRadio. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts, please give us a little review. That really does help us out. Remember, guys, stay fueled up this fantasy season.